Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Today we're going to be diving into the latest patch of set 6, 12.2. The meta ended up in a great spot for the previous patch, so balance changes in 12.2 will mostly even out some of the issues shaking up things too much. That said, there are going to be some spicy changes to talk about. As always, we recommend reading the full patch notes as we're only covering the most meta-relevant adjustments. Let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back into the video. Interestingly, there are system changes, so we'll go over those first before getting into balance changes. The system changes for patch 12.2 are to the shop odds at level 8 and 9. The Spark Notes versions of this that they lowered the chances of 5-cost champions at level 8 by 1% and increased it by 1% at level 9. The extra percentage was added to and removed from level 1 shop odds, while all other tiers remained unchanged. It's certainly interesting to see this done as we're so close to the mid-set, as that's usually the time that these types of adjustments happen. But the reasoning is sound, as hitting a 2-star 5-cost level 8 was happening just a bit too frequently. Their solution is to drop it down to 4%, which on average should lower the chances of it happening. The side effect is that some players will get luckier and still hit on only a 4% chance, while others will be unlucky and never hit it at all, similarly to how level 7 plays out. Not quite to that degree, of course, since it's still only a 4% chance. Overall, this change may end up being healthy for the game, assuming 5-cost champions continue to be powerful. Plus, it does make going for level 9 more appealing, but that's a whole other issue of level 9 still costing way too much gold. With that done, let's move on to the augment changes for patch 12.2. Once again, there are a lot of changes here, most of which are minor adjustments to crest, heart, and soul augments. We recommend reading the patch notes to see all of the changes. Let's begin with a small nerf to the Metabolic Accelerator. Metabolic quickly became the best all-around augment since free health is kinda good, and by kinda good we mean broken. They've altered the augment to no longer work on PvE rounds, which is overall a good nerf, though they still may need further adjustments in future patches. The next change is to Item Grab Bag 2, as they re-added one Reforger when taking this augment. 2 Reforgers was definitely too much previously, so just one should be a sweet spot. One of the stranger buffs is to High Roller, as it now will also grant 4 gold when taken. High Roller never felt like a weak option, though maybe compared to a few other prismatic options it wasn't performing as well as they hoped. Weird buff, but 4 gold is not going to break the meta. Wise Spending is also being buffed to grant 4 gold, and this makes slightly more sense, though it's potentially going to mess up the early game a bit. Definitely keep an eye out on this change being more impactful than intended. A very minor change is that of Thrill of the Hunt 3, which was removed entirely as they felt the extra healing was redundant, particularly as a prismatic augment. The reasoning is sound, and keep in mind the first 2 tiers are still in the game. Stand Behind Me has a neat theme, but in practice is rarely ever used. To make it more appealing, they've increased the bonus armor by 25%, so maybe we'll see this augment played in this patch, though it's unlikely to become a mainstay in the meta. And finally, the big augment change of the patch is to Portable Forge. The Ornn artifacts, while powerful, just haven't been up to par with other prismatic augments. Thus, they're lowering Portable Forge down 1 tier into gold. As a gold augment, Portable Forge should be one of the best options, since few other augments of that tier can compete with the value of an Ornn artifact item. Keep in mind that all the artifacts are being nerfed across the board due to them being 1 tier lower now. Check out the patch notes to see the exact number changes, as there are quite a few. Overall, this should be a good change to help identify how best to balance Portable Forge. It should be a strong option, and we maybe will see it return to Prismatic one day once they've nailed down the best way to balance the artifacts. Let's now move on to the next section, trait changes. The first trait change is to Bodyguards. The idea behind these changes is the way they want bodyguards to do slightly better against non-physical damage and make it easier for AD boards to take them down. To accomplish this, they've moved a bit of the increased armor over to shields. While the idea behind the change makes sense, it is a bit worrying that they're lowering the physical armor of bodyguards, because that's their identity as frontliners. If they wanted them to be better against magic damage, why not just give them magic resist in addition to armor? In any case, this changes should make bodyguards noticeably weaker in the meta that favors AD compositions, more of a neutral change if it's AP focused. Thank the Mort Dog that they fixed Imperial 5, as the trait had a bug where, in certain situations, the damage buff would disappear. This should help Imperial be more of a viable option in the meta, though it's still likely to be niche since it requires specific augments to do well. The largest change is to Mercenaries, because as it turns out, it's way too easy to cast out with a loss streak to essentially gain a free win if you had Mercenaries active on 2-1. The solution they've arrived at is to nerf the average payout for each tier, plus removing Nico's help from smaller loss streaks. May not be quite enough, but it's a step in the right direction to hopefully make Mercenaries less of a free win when hitting a big cash out. Scrap 4 is getting the tiniest of buffs with a 5 shield increase, which should help it do better early game. Not hugely impactful, but definitely worth knowing about. While Socialite is still one of the strongest synergies, getting to 3 Socialites can be rare unless you have Augments. To make the 3 Socialite chase more appealing, they've buffed the Omnivamp to 33 from 30%. That's not a lot, sure, but it rewards players for that commitment to the trait. And the weirdest change is to Syndicate. First off, they're nerfing the armor and magic resist by 5. That's fine and makes sense as high roll Syndicates is a bit too strong. But then they're buffing the bonus for 7 Syndicates to 60% from 50%, which is quite odd because 7 Syndicate is why the trait was doing well in the first place. Baffling changes to us, but they do a lot of balancing based on data, and Syndicate can be quite high roll dependent, so that may be why. Time now for champion changes. Okay, so is anyone else confused about them nerfing Ziggs? Sure, Ziggs 3 is being buffed, but is Ziggs at level 1 and 2 actually doing too well? If anything, Ziggs is the worst 1-cost champion in set 6, even TFT as a whole, so nerfing him feels like bullying. But more than likely it has to do with Yordles being too good in the early game for free economy, but come on, leave Ziggs alone. They must want Katarina back in the meta as they've buffed her health by 50. Not a substantial buff by any means, but it is one step closer to a Cat Week returning. There have been complaints that Zyra 1 is too good, though those complaints are odd because Zyra can be such a hit-or-miss champion, especially at level 1. But they've listened to those complaints that Zyra 1 is now slightly weaker, while Zyra 3 is slightly stronger. Ultimately, not going to make too much of a difference. Shaco is the target of the infamous 5 attack damage nerf this patch, and it does make sense that Shaco 2 was a bit too strong at stabilizing in the mid-game. Okay-ge nerf, but a bit sad for the Syndicate Assassin. They just can't leave Vex alone, can they? Isn't she sad and gloomy enough already? Well, they must not think so. She's being nerfed at level 1 to now reduce how effective she is at stabilizing boards before being upgraded to level 2. The reasoning makes sense, it's just unfortunate to see Vex pulled back and forth on balance. Let's be honest, Cho'Gath isn't good. At least not until you 3-star him, and even then he's not amazing. Thus, they want to help old Cho'Gath by buffing his armor and magic resist, plus an additional damage to his feast ability. Will be enough to make Cho worth 2 spots on your board? Probably not, but at least it won't feel as bad to do so. Gangplank is being buffed at tier 2 and 3. Tier 3 is fine because Gangplank 3 is quite rare, but at level 2 is very strange because it just makes it easier to cash out with mercenaries. But hey, Gangplank carry is fun, so at least this makes for more fun and exciting moments. Heimerdinger is not doing well as they want, so they are buffing his attack speed slightly and increasing the damage of his ability at tier 2 and 3. Reasoning is that Heimerdinger is meant to be a carry, but never quite lives up to that role. Honestly, Heimerdinger feels more like supplemental damage, and that's fine, especially as a Yordle. We'll see if these changes do enough for Heimerdinger to finally carry, though his design may just be too limiting for that. Beefy frontline boys are both taking a hit as Braum and Scion are having their starting and max mana increased. The first cast will remain unchanged, but subsequent casts will take longer. Overall, it's a good change, but it's always unfortunate to see frontliners nerfed. Seraphine's healing is a smidge too strong, so they're toning it down at each tier. This is a good adjustment since they're not completely gutting Seraphine, but it does lessen her impact on fights. To play Urgot is to suffer unless you have really good items to hit an Urgot too quickly. To reduce that suffering, they're buffing his attack damage ratio to 30%. It's not much, but at least it's a buff. A lot of players have complained about Orianna being too good, especially since she can be played in so many comps. Naturally, that means the nerf bat is here, though not by a lot as they've only lowered the shield amount by 10 at tier 2. More than likely this won't be noticeable, so we may see additional Orianna nerfs in future patches. And finally, the 5-cost champions. Let's get the minor buffs out of the way as melee Jace is gaining a small boost to his shield. Ranged Jace is probably still preferable, but at least they're continuing to balance both sides so that eventually both options will be viable. Jinx is easily the worst 5-cost, so they had to buff her, right? Correct! Though only to the attack damage scaling of her rockets, which is going up by 10 at tiers 1 and 2. Not substantial buffs by any means, but anything that helps Jinx is worth it. While Victor 2 is doing well enough, Victor 1 struggles. They're hoping to fix this by adding a bit of damage to his ability at level 1 with a slight nerf to the damage at level 2. Overall, decent changes. Unsurprisingly, Kai'Sa is getting nerfed with her attack speed going down to 1.1 from 1.2. Kai'Sa isn't as ridiculous as she's been in previous metas, but still plenty strong as a carry, especially if you can 2-star her early. And the big 5-cost change is the old Tahm Kench. This demon catfish has been terrorizing the meta, especially when players high roll him in stage 4. Thus, they're nerfing his devour damage and lowering the stats gained from feeding by 10%. While these nerfs are justified, it doesn't fully address the issue of Tahm Kench being able to farm infinite gold and components. But it may happen less often with reduced scaling and less devour damage, so we'll have to see how it plays out. Oh, and they added a quality of life change that only champions from the bench can be fed to the Kench, so no more accidentally feeding your 3-star unit to him. The last section to talk about is changes to items. First up, Locket is gaining 7 additional seconds on the shield duration. A substantial buff to be sure, so expect to see a lot more early game Locket slams. Past this, the item is likely still to be subpar, but we'll have to see as players have been quite creative with this item in the past. By far the funniest change this patch is the Chalice, as they're bumping back the bonus AP down to 30 from 35. 5 AP may not seem like a lot, but it does make a huge difference for AP scaling comps. Unfortunately, that does mean Chalice is likely back to the never used club. And finally, Hand of Justice is gaining a minor buff with the bonus damage going from 30% to 33%. While this is a small number, it should help Hand of Justice return to its position as one of the better flex items. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. With the mid-set approaching, expect to see patches for set 6 become less meta-altering. While 12.2 does have some big changes, overall it is on the tamer side, so you can go into ranked expecting a lot of what worked previously to continue working. Let us know in the comment section below what changes you'd like to see in the next patch that weren't added in 12.2. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.